Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of the Jerry Brazy Podcast, and I am the aforementioned Mr. Jerry Brazy. So happy to have you here. Let's talk about what's going on in the world, but before we get started, I want you to go like that, hit that like button, smash it for me, okay? Leave a comment. I'm happy to talk to you. Let me know what you think about what you hear me saying. Also, spread the word for me if you wouldn't mind, and make sure to subscribe. Hit me at Jerry Brazy. You can find me anywhere on social media using my name. I am TikTok and Twitter in particular, and of course YouTube for a bunch of short videos. Go take a look at that and let me know what you think in the comments. Here we go. We're off. California is burning today is the 19th of January as I'm making this video. It will come out in the next few days. And I want to talk about something that I know a lot about, which is the real estate side of it, and something that I think most people in society, particularly in the West, misunderstand or just don't have any idea how it works. And that is, why is the cost of housing so expensive, particularly on the West Coast and up in the Northeast parts of the world? And I can tell you from experience, anybody doesn't knows anything about me, I have bought, sold, built, developed more houses than I can count, and have intimate knowledge over the last almost 20 years now of doing it, so that I feel like I am qualified to bring that information to you. And the question is, what don't the majority of you guys know about what the Californians are going to face and what most people who live on the West Coast face every single day? And that is bureaucracy. It is not the cost of real estate. The cost of a house is not the fault of the builder. It is not the fault of the person who developed the land and sold that parcel to the builder to then build the house. None of those things have anything to do with the skyrocketing cost of housing really over the last 15 or so years. To really look at it in depth, you got to go back to 2008 and the financial crisis. That was the beginning of the end as they started to dump money into the system. But it goes back even further than that. When you start talking about government overreach coming out of the 70s, really, in all of these states, Oregon, Washington, Idaho in particular. It's always been tough in the Northeast, up in New York and all of that. It wasn't so tough on the West Coast like it is in the Northeast until the 70s showed up. The 70s come in, and every year time has marched on, and every decade it's gotten worse and worse and worse. The amount of regulations that a builder has to jump through in order to build that house. Let's back up. Let's talk about a developer. A developer is somebody who does the lots. They're doing the groundwork. They're underground, bringing in the utilities. They're doing all of that. And at the end of it, then the builder comes in, puts his foundations in onto lots that have property lines adjusted correctly. Everything's been recorded. Like I said, all of the internals for what make a neighborhood under the ground are done. All of the streets are in. All of the curbs are in. The builder comes in and does his job, and the builder is building the house, puts the foundation on, builds the house up on top of it. That builder has to deal with costs just like anybody else does, and so as inflation rises, the cost of everything goes up, and the costs have gone through the roof over the last 5-6 years. COVID really slammed it in a big way, and then interest rates took off, so we had that double whammy of interest rates taking off. So that means there's not as many houses on the market. And at the same time, the cost to build a house has skyrocketed because the cost of all of the goods needed to build that house has gone up exponentially. So in and of itself, the market is reacting. The price of houses are going up in reaction to those two market forces. Those are absolutely market forces, but they are not the fault of supply and demand. Supply and demand plays a big part, in why things are so expensive, but supply and demand has been manipulated. It has been impinged. It has been held back, supply side has, by the governments across the board. I don't know the number, but if I were to guess, I mean, I have sold houses and built houses and consulted on deals for houses where I have seen $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 appreciation in six-figure houses over the last 4 years. That's insane. It's incredible. It's insane. the city that I grew up in, Portland, Oregon, it's insane. And you try to build a house in Portland, Oregon. Try to build a house in LA. Back to where I started from with the California fires. The California fires are going to show the world on a national scale, because of what LA is and how big this fire is and how many people it has impacted and how many celebrities it has impacted. Y'all are about to see what all of us have been having to deal with over the last 15 or 20 years. The bureaucracy and the regulation and the strangulation of the process. You all don't have houses. You all can't buy a house. You all can't afford the house that you're in now, or you all can't afford to sell out of your house because of what the government has done. The government is at fault for this across the board. The value of the dollar is so deflated because of the amount of money that they have been spending that inflation is off the charts. In order to combat inflation, you have to raise interest rates. So now interest rates are 7% and houses are become unaffordable. Houses aren't unaffordable because inflation has caused interest rates to go to 7%. Houses are unaffordable at 7% because the cost of the house is artificially inflated due to the government squeezing of every single market, every single major market on the West Coast. You can go to San Francisco and you can go to the edge of what they call the urban growth boundary. If you don't know what this is and you live in any of these cities, you need to listen up and go do some research. We have them in Portland. They're all over the West Coast, urban growth boundaries. And the urban growth boundary says exactly what it sounds like. It is a boundary on which nothing can grow beyond relative to housing. So you might be able to put in a 5,000 square foot lot and put in a subdivision. But there is an arbitrary line in the sand, in the grass as it is, in the dirt, that says you can't build beyond this point. So you can go to San Francisco, you can be looking out the back of a 1,500 square foot ranch home built 50 years ago, and it's got a little backyard, and then beyond the backyard, for as far as the eye can see to the west, or to the east, nothing. Nothing as far as you can see. That's California. You get out of those urban areas. Anybody who hasn't been to the East Coast or the West Coast, from the East Coast, I live in Tennessee now. Anybody's never been out there, you have no idea how big things are. You have no idea how expansive things are. Zero idea how much land is sitting empty out there. And these cities have put in urban growth boundaries. And the urban growth boundaries don't allow you to grow out. They also don't allow you to grow up. So they're capped at how high you can go. And the work you got to put in to try to go and to alleviate that and build something that makes sense, since your land is so tight, now you want to go up. Try and do that. It's almost impossible to do. And if you do it, it's going to cost you millions upon millions upon millions upon millions before you've built one thing. No. Millions upon millions before you've even put a shovel in the ground to start to develop the property, to bring in the infrastructure needed to then build a neighborhood. The system is completely broken. And as time has gone by, and the older folks retire out of these counties and cities and states, the younger folks come in, taught by these schools, who essentially pit you, the developer, you, the builder, against the county, against the city, against the state, making it almost impossible, or that much more impossible, for you to build what you want to build the way that you want to build. They can stop you by simply sliding a piece of paper across a table, across a desk, and not looking at it, costing you another month, 2 months, 3 months. I could tell you stories personally of 1 year delays on something that should have taken a couple of months, easy. I can tell you stories of developers who are carrying carrying costs in the tens of thousands per month or hundreds of thousands per month. So every month that the developer or that the county slows the process down, doesn't respond like they should, doesn't act as quickly as they should, somebody gets a burr up their ass because they don't like the way that they were talked to in the last meeting, or they were talked about, or the pressure was put on them, and then they decide not to just come to work for 3 days. All of a sudden it gets moved to another place on the desk, and the work doesn't get done and nothing happens. And we just sit here on our hands waiting. Meanwhile, the clock is ticking and the carry costs, that is the interest payment on the money invested to that point to get the property to this point. No building having taken place. Years and years and sometimes decades having gone by, waiting for the counties to do the work and to do the things that they should, the way that they should in a timely manner, a manner reflective of the lack of housing and the massive explosion of costs of housing, stopping the very people that the government continues, continues to say that they advocate for to not have a place to live, to not be able to afford, to steal that American dream from the young people. That's the system, people. That's where the system is. That's the holdup. That's the roadblock. That is what is in the way of this system working in a way that would benefit all of us. We are in a huge double whammy because we have huge high interest rates and we have overpriced housing. Something has to give. Combined with that, then, in California and Oregon in particular, you got to deal with, and Washington, but I don't have as much experience in Washington. You have to deal with the insurance. I was remodeling a house. I did a huge remodel on a house 2 summers ago, last summer. Sold it last year. And on the house that I remodeled, it was a significant remodel. I needed insurance on the construction. Portland, Oregon, right in the middle of the city. Because there was a fire, a forest fire. This is Oregon. Anybody's never been to Oregon, all there is forests. Because there was a forest fire within 20 miles, 20 miles as a crow flies. Because there was a forest fire within 20 miles, I couldn't get insurance until that fire was 70% contained. So that meant for about 2/3 of the time that I had workers on the ground, the house taken down to the studs, there was $250,000 spent on that remodel. In the time it took to do that, I only had insurance for 1/3 of it because there was a fire within 20 miles. That's the system. And there's just nothing you can do about it. The people in California had their insurance taken away because of the government overreach and the government's attempts in California to manage the system, to manage the insurance, taking out the market forces, taking out the insurance companies' abilities to look at what's happening in the world and what has happened in the past, and then make insurance the price of or then price their insurance accordingly. The government was taking all that away from them and just saying, no, you got to look out into the future. Just recently have they been able to look in the past and come up. Imagine that. Just recently has California allowed the insurers to look into the past to get a better idea of what the cost of insurance might look like into the immediate future. The whole system's upside down. The supply or capitalism has been taken out of it, and it's all managed. And look what's happened when it's managed. As you watch California burn, and then you don't watch as California doesn't get rebuilt, and you watch while the government and the banks swoop in and steal everything from everybody, leaving people without that asset that maybe they were given or maybe they earned, however that happened, because they were upside down when it burnt down and they didn't have insurance through no fault of their own because of their 13.5%, 14% taxes they pay in the state went to whatever other boondoggling went to other than mitigating the fire exposure that everyone has known about for 100 years. Because of that, these people are going to be ruined, and the government will sit there and twiddle their thumbs and say, you didn't fill out form number 971. Now, I will tell you that there has to be rules. I'll be the first to say it. There has to be rules. But I'm telling you, as somebody with 20 years of experience doing this, the system is broken. There's no two ways around it. It is untenable almost. And here's the worst part. There is no room for the small builder. So if you are a small builder and you want to build in Portland, Oregon, you want to build a house or a development, let's say you want to do 10 or 15 lots and just do a small development, or you want to do 50 or 100 lots, you're not going to be able to. It's very, very, very difficult. The days of the small builder are gone the same way the days of a small bank are gone. In 2008, when everything failed, for you guys that aren't old enough to remember back then, they had a thing called too big to fail. were all the big banks, because they had so over leveraged on most of this mortgage debt that wasn't tied to any equity. They just gave the mortgages away, essentially. That's, again, I'm paraphrasing, but they gave mortgages away to people who couldn't pay them. The market tanks. All of a sudden, nobody's paying their mortgages. The value of the mortgage is not what the value of the house is, because they did these things called liar loans. Anyway, the whole system collapses. What's the government do? The government gives these big banks, chastising them daily along the way about how they're too big to fail, so we have to save them. But big bad bankers got called up to Capitol Hill and chastised left and right and told what kind of enemies of the people that they are, only for those same bankers then to go away. In 2008 to 2025, all of those banks that were too big to fail are all 2, 3, 4 times bigger than they were at the time. In fact, there's been no new banks started. It's been so difficult. The bankers got to do exactly what the home builders like to do. The big national publicly traded home builders love the regulation. The regulation, because, just like the banks, it stifles any kind of competition. It makes it almost impossible for the single guy with a pickup truck to buy a lot and build a house in any of these cities. Now, you can go to the Midwest, you can go to the middle part of the country, you can go to Texas, you can come down here, down in the South, and you can do it. But up in the Northeast and down on the West Coast, it is almost impossible. Now, before anybody reaches out to me to tell me, Jerry, I'm doing just fine and I'm building houses, I get you're out there. There's not nearly enough of you, and everyone knows there's not nearly enough people out there doing it. It should be 10 to 1, small builder to big builder. It is not. It is inverse to that, and it is only those that are financed by by publicly traded money that can come in and effectively manage the gigantic load that is 2 things: administrative, i.e., getting the project to the point where you can then build something on the land. That takes years before you get to put a shovel in the ground. So that's number one. You got to be able to do all of the administrative parts that come to it, which is overly onerous, as I described earlier. And number 2, you got to have the carry. You got to be able to carry the interest, or you got to have the money given to you by investors that allow you then to put that money in. It's millions and millions and millions of dollars to then carry that money through the time that it takes to bring that lot or that subdivision, provide the lots to the builders. And then the builders got another year on top of it before they get houses built. The whole system is broken. In the meanwhile, the government, the city government, the county government, those are the 2 most responsible, do everything they can to fight you along the way in those areas. Everything. And any mistake that they make comes back on you. You can appeal it. You turn around, the appeal process takes 6, 8, 10 weeks. And you can end up right back where you were 10 weeks later, where you were 10 weeks earlier, because someone didn't dot the I or cross the T at the county, at the city, at the state, the way they are supposed to. The problem is yours. There's no appreciation for the cost. There's no appreciation for the carry. There's no appreciation for the lack of housing. There's no emergency situation that says our constituency, the people who put us here, the people who pay our salaries, the tax-paying public that works so hard, can't buy a house. And the problem with it is us. No, they'll blame you. They'll blame me. They'll blame me, the developer, me, the builder. They'll blame everybody but the real problem. And the developers and the builders can't say anything, because the very people they're chastising are the ones that they then have to go hold their hand to get them to do the job for them that they need so that they can buy you, or they can build you a house. Forget about building a house. Try to remodel a house. Go to Portland, Oregon right now. Go to California right now and try to remodel a house. Let me know how that goes. You can remodel a house. Elon Musk said famously that working with his rockets, they can build one of these super rockets faster than they can get permission from the government to launch it. Now, that is 100% true in building of houses. We can build houses significantly faster by years in many cases, multiple years in many cases, than it takes to get permission to build the house, that it takes to get permission to build the development. So whenever you hear, I'm not going to say that there aren't Don't send me stories about developers that rip people off. Absolutely happen. In any system, it happened. I'm talking about macro. I'm talking about the real reason why across the board in all of these areas, they all suffer from the same problem. And that is government. Government corruption, government inadequacy, government bureaucracy, the lack of we work for you, not you work for us. There is none of that in any of these counties, in any of these cities, in any of these towns. And anyone tells you differently is saying that out of self-preservation, because we all have to go and we have to kowtow to these people. We all have to work with them. So no one ever says anything and nothing ever gets done. And every year, the Senate and the Capitol Hill and the states and the cities and the towns and the counties, everybody passes new rules and new laws, and it changes. And what was a law 2 days ago is no longer a law today. And so all that paperwork that you spent the last 6 months doing is now no good, and you need to resubmit it. And by the way, we got to re-engineer, and we got to redo this, and we got to redo that. That is the process. That's the program. And when you are a small builder who can build a little bit more, can build a little bit more specialized, maybe throw something a little bit extra that the big guys can't afford to do, put a little extra personal care into it, maybe bring that cost down even a little bit because he's the one actually doing the work. They don't exist. Ever inflating the price. Every layer adds something more to the price. And that just has continued on unabated now for decades. Hopefully this is a wake-up call. Hopefully they do something about it and make the process much more streamlined, much more straightforward. We can build houses in months. We can take bare land and develop it in months so that you could fix a problem that has been looming now and has been upon us for decades relatively quickly if there was the political will. But you got environmentalists, and you've got people who hate people who make money, and you've got the system, the process is so broken, and the system is working against the people who actually do the work in such a way that I don't see it fixing itself anytime soon. In fact, I think it's only going to get worse, in particular for the areas that have the urban growth boundary. Now, why is that? I say, well, just get rid of the urban growth boundary. Let's be like Texas, right? Texas, it's inverted. It's the opposite the way it is. Florida, down here in Tennessee is a lot easier to build. Down here in the South generally is a lot easier to build. Through the Midwest, it's easier to build. But let's use Texas as a great example. Most of Texas, no urban growth boundary. So you can just go build. If somebody wants it, you can build it. I'm paraphrasing. It's more complex than that, but not by much. Relative to, let's take Portland, my backyard. Okay? Portland, let's say you've got a house on the urban growth boundary, goes right up against it. That house I mentioned in San Francisco for 1,600 feet that goes for $2 million, and as far as the eye can see behind it is nothing. The second they move that urban growth boundary out, what happens to the value of that house? I mean, certainly you can move it so far, put in enough fill that it would take care of some of the demand that is there now in relatively short order, maybe saving the value of that 1,600-foot house at $2 million with that $2 million mortgage, but that's not going to alleviate your house problem, not anywhere near, right? We're millions of houses behind in the United States being built. We need more. So you got to move all the way out. But if you move all the way out to build enough houses to take care of demand at a price people can afford, and you work with the government to streamline the entire system, what happens to the existing houses that have been part of the market forces arbitrarily, artificially created by the government in terms of in the case of the urban growth boundary? What happens to those houses when all of a sudden there's thousands of houses behind them to take care of the problem, to take care of the glut, to take care of the cost? What happens to the value of those houses? It's cut significantly. They've done this to themselves. They've made the problem what it is because of lack of foresight, because of ideology, because of a lack of appreciation for market forces, for capitalism, and an appreciation for what people have to go through to dig a hole, put in a foundation, build a house, buy a house, live in it, raise a family, and repeat. I don't know what the answer is. I hope we get one soon. because this problem is not going to get any better. It's not going to get worse. And they just wiped out 10, 20, however many it is, 15,000 houses in some of the most expensive zip codes in the country that also happen to be the most restrictive when it comes to building zip codes in the country. That is not a coincidence. That is proof of this little diatribe that I just went through, hoping that you guys understand what is really the issue. They love to point at the person doing the work as the person who's at fault. The greedy developer is ripping you off. The greedy home builder is ripping you off. The greedy agent is ripping you off. The exact opposite is the case. The exact opposite is the truth. And it's like in all things when it comes to government, whatever is coming out of their mouth, they are usually doing. I hope this helps. I really do. Remember to like and subscribe. I hope you found this educational, and maybe we can turn the tide in some of these locations and push back and make the process simpler and easier. And I'm not saying roll over. There needs to be rules. But I'm telling you, it is beyond imagination, the complexity involved in getting any of these projects off the ground, built and finished. Unimaginable. Opportunities are everywhere. You got to go get them. Go for a walk.